Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and welcome to Overwatch Central. Today we're going over a multitude of topics with Skyline, including Hero 31, what we want to see out of them, Rework and why it might not be a good idea after all, and also how balancing nerfs and stuff have actually damaged Overwatch's hero identities, which in terms has made the game a lot more problematic for Blizzard. I feel like we haven't properly introduced our guest in this video, Skyline, before. He made a lot of content in the first few months after Overwatch came out, a lot of educational content, how to improve, analysing pro play. He was a similar content to somebody like Jane, but around the 2016-2017 era. He's recently been working on a lot of esports endeavours, but still knows a good amount about the game. So in this video, we're going over all of that stuff. All the details of Skyline are in the description below, but let's get started. You've had a bit of a break. We kind of went over this in the other video, Skyline, away from Overwatch, focusing on various different other esports games. What was the state of Overwatch like when you first left, I suppose, and started covering stuff like PUBG and that?
Yeah, so I feel like I almost got chased out of Overwatch by how rough of a state it was in when I left. Because when I left, that was deep. That was like in the middle. That was right after Mercy got reworked. If you recall, she got her changed to her revive, so she only resurrected one person at a time, and she had all that stuff, which was all good. Like I thought that the concept of the rework was, for better or worse. Necessarily, it didn't have to ruin the game, but you had. If you probably recall, there was a period of time of 6 months at least where you basically had to pick Mercy or you automatically lost. Like she was just so insanely overpowered, and kills didn't matter anymore because no matter what, you'd get a kill or just be auto res. So the game was really, really, really rough when I left, especially as a support player, right? Because if you're a DPS or you're a tank, you could play whatever. But if you're a support player, it just always felt really bad knowing that just because someone was playing Mercy, they would automatically be a better support player than you because you weren't playing Mercy. So it was rough. That was when I left.
There's been a lot that's happened since then. I think 2018 basically became the year of the rework, with stuff like Torbjorn being changed, Symmetra being changed again, the Mercy meta at the beginning of it, sort of coming back sort of into the game sphere now. You've not necessarily been completely abject from Overwatch, like you've been following it to a certain level, but you've not been making content on it. When you came back, would you say that you came back in the game being in a better state or worse? Because there's a lot of people saying Overwatch is dying and all that stuff because of Overwatch League viewers going down, Twitch views going down. Is the game now objectively in a better spot than it was when you left?
I think that when I left, it was at its absolute low point. I know that things were pretty rough with full power Bridget. I didn't personally experience that, so I don't know if that was lower. I know that was also pretty bad, but I feel like the Mercy meta was the lowest point of the game. It's pretty hard to get much worse than that, I think. Right now, I think that the game is better than it's been in a while, but it's caught in the same problem it's been in for the past couple of years of just sort of having a difficult time finding its identity. How do we make it an esport while also being this game that's just a good game, and the hero identities and the reworks and stuff. So it's been a bit chaotic, I understand, in the past year or so.
Hero 31's been teased at the moment and is looking to be like a tank. What would you like to see from Blizzard with making a new off-tank, main tank to make the game much more interesting, balance it differently? What do you think the game really needs right now?
Yeah, that's that's a really hard question because they're coming out with a tank and we're already in a tank meta. So you would need to have, like, if you were to just say, okay, you can't have anything but just this one hero, what are you going to do? You'd need to have a tank that discourages other tanks, like a tank busting tank. But then you have like that in and of itself does not promote tanks. Sounds a bit crazy. But I guess moving towards almost and then you get Doomfist, right? which people don't want absolutely at all. So I think that it'll be pretty difficult. I'm really interested to see how like an off tank / tank fits into the game right now that's already so tank oriented. I guess Doomfist really punishes squishy people because he one-shots them, and he doesn't. And tanks don't get one-shot. So I would like to see something that's the opposite. I would like to see a hero that is not so good against DPS necessarily, or like he's okay against DPS, but he really just tears tanks open somehow. I haven't thought about it extensively, so I don't know how you do it, but if that were the effect that the hero had, I think it would have a beneficial impact on the meta, because right now it's obviously just way too difficult for teams to bust through tank walls because there's just nothing strong enough.
From your perspective as somebody that is in the esports scene, and I guess to an extent you have to put yourself in a position where you're understanding why Blizzard is doing certain things, both with balancing the game and also esports. What's your take on it? Like, are you on the side of like Overwatch League has made the game in a sense worse because of the focus being on an esport? Or do you feel like having the focus being on the pro play is better for the game as a whole, the whole trickle down mechanics sort of?
I think, and it's hard to really absolutely get into the mind of like the Overwatch team and such. There have been interviews, and you've had developers say things like, "Oh, we don't care, like we don't use the Overwatch League to affect us at all. Like we don't balance for quote unquote esports. We balance just to make a good game." I think that the whole concept of esports and the Overwatch League being good for the game is just a little bit backwards to begin with, because if you look at all the classic biggest titles in esports and such, that's not really how it works. You have things like Dota that was a great game that people became passionate about enough to say, hey, I bet that I'm the best Dota player. Like, I bet that my team is the best. And the other clan in Warcraft 3 is like, no, actually, our clan is the best. And then they play against each other, and then you have tournaments, and then eventually that builds and builds and builds until you have this thriving sort of scene. It didn't happen in a month or a year or 2 years. It happened in multiple, several over a course of many, many years. Same thing with Counter-Strike. League was faster, but you even had the same thing with League. Like, there was never a focus on League of Legends esports when it first came out. They didn't even have a spectator client. They hacked the game with an invisible Teemo in the fountain to watch these games, right? With the most minimal possible tournament support. And then eventually the game was so good and it got such a passionate following, and this is the case for all these titles, that you had an esports scene. So I think just the whole, it's just very foreign and strange to me, the concept of like an esports league helping a game, because it's always the game that comes first and then the esports or the competition that comes after. Activision Blizzard made a statement to their shareholders that like the strategy for our company over the next few years is going to be esports development. And that was during the development of Overwatch. Like, they had planned Overwatch League before Overwatch was out. So that was something, and I'm sure that it wasn't like the developer's idea, right? Jeff Kaplan wasn't like, oh man, I really want Overwatch League. It was definitely a business it was an overarching business strategy of all of Activision Blizzard to pursue esports, and this is just the way they tried to implement it for Overwatch. So yeah, I mean, yeah, in a certain sense, depending on how you define the word, it very much got forced onto Overwatch.
A couple of months ago now, Siegel did a video sort of talking about the state of Overwatch and the problems that the game has, just the way that it works. Ultimate's been powerful. A couple of people highlighted how, because it's an objective-based game, it really emphasizes those compositions that require sustain, not pick compositions, because this isn't team deathmatch. This is stand on an objective and don't die. If you were in a situation where you're like kind of Siegel, where it's like, hey, these are the problems in the game, what is the first thing that you'd say? Almost like
if you tell me what the number one problem with Overwatch is, I can tell you immediately. I've believed this for multiple years now, and it's that they've, in an effort to balance it and make it more competitive, because people always think that competitive means like flat. They've really flattened the game a lot with its balance, which is It works for some games, like something like League of Legends is a game that has very flat balance, where all of the champions in League of Legends do very similar things. Like they all have a stun and slow, and they all last pretty similar amount of time, and they have damage, and they have ultimates, and like all the heroes are very, very similar in League of Legends. But that's because the game is designed to be like that. In a game like Overwatch, if you have a bunch of very flat heroes that do very similar things but minor variations, you're going to wind up with the exact sort of meta we have right now, where pick doesn't really do anything because you don't have any DPS heroes that do anything crazy enough to really be able to surpass the way the game just naturally is designed. And this goes back to, if you recall, when Overwatch first came out, you had a bunch of crazy hero designs that were awesome. Like when Zenyatta first came out, he had 150 HP, but he hit like a truck. He did like 1 billion damage, right? If you're a really good Zenyatta, you could just tear people up. But the downside is he would just die to anything. He would get one shot by Widowmaker. You had Bastion that was very slow, but when he got into turret form, he would just tear through everything. They changed all these heroes to be more normalized. So like for Zenyatta, they gave him back 50 HP, so he's more like a normal hero, and they took away his damage back down to like more of a normal hero. With Bastion, they made him faster and they made him more dynamic, but they took away a lot of his damage, so he was more like a normal hero. And you can see this across the entire board, where they did this with Mercy, for example. She could like res an entire team. That was nuts, right? Oh, well, that was too quote unquote hard to balance. That was too crazy. So they only let her res one person. She was more like a normal hero. And slowly over time, you had McCree, who had crazy, insane melee damage with his Fan the Hammer. They took that away, so he was more like a normal DPS hero. And I'm just repeating myself now because slowly over time, all these changes made it so all the heroes in the game have really flattened down to be quite similar. Like obviously there are differences. It's not as extreme as League of Legends, but a game balanced more like Dota will obviously have more strategies. Something like Dota, because in Dota the heroes have crazy abilities. Like one hero can teleport across the map at level 1. He can just teleport wherever he wants. It's sort of nuts. Another hero is just like permanently can walk anywhere they want through webs. It's a broodmother. And you see a lot more variety of strategy in Dota. So I think that's it's, and the issue was the game was initially developed with the very strong hero identities, and it's really just gotten to the point where it's gotten so flat in terms of what the heroes do that you can't balance it that way anymore. Because Siegel made an excellent point. Just the way the game is right now, without absolutely doing a crazy change, you will never have a pick composition, because there's nothing that is extreme enough or strong enough to actually break out of the natural flow of the game. You need an ability that's really, really strong, or a hero that it's extremely eccentric to do that. And Overwatch just doesn't have that anymore. It used to, but they slowly took the personality and the special traits out of every single hero in the game.
So you must be looking at here, like the change to McCree is an interesting one recently, where his sort of recoil rate, I suppose it would be, has been reduced. It can fire a lot more frequently. A lot of people are saying how like OP and broken he is, but I guess your argument to that would be like it makes the hero interesting, and that's something that we haven't had in a long ass time.
Yeah, I think that it's at the point where it's, like I said, it's going to be impossible to fix the issue that I just outlined. If you agree with me if someone were to agree with me that that's an issue, it's impossible to fix that without really doing crazy things to the game that look very strange first, because people have been used to a certain power level for so long that's actually very, very low compared to where the game started. Because if you think about, when the game started, you had animation canceling Widowmaker that could like move around super ultra fast and scope in and out. You had McCree with a super strong Fan the Hammer. You had the heroes we just talked about. You had Genji, who had animation canceling, where he was much more dynamic and triple wall jumping. So every hero in the game was much stronger and had a much more distinct personality when the game first came out and the first year of the game than they do now. So people are used to this power level, and in order to bring it up, you'd have to like do the entire cast at the same time. Otherwise, you'll have really broken heroes. So it'll be very difficult to change the game in a way that will break the meta in the way that people want, while not sort of disrupting the expectations of power level that people already have established over the past 2 years or so.
Role lock has been something that has been, like teased, I suppose. It's looking quite likely. Blizzard want to do it. It's been rumored. What's your take on role queue, as in like a 2-2-2 lock? Do you think that's going to be really good for the game, or again, do you feel like that's just going to vanilla it out? Because I think that's basically what you've been describing. All of these, oh my god, this hero is ridiculous kind of heroes in the game have been just diminished to cookie cutter balanced heroes, right? So would a role lock help in that case?
Yeah, I think that I just can't see role lock being something that's good for the game long term. I think that maybe at this very second it could be good. It would also allow, it would have the benefit of letting people do role queue as well, which is nice. That's like a cool, nice thing, is people to just queue for a particular role and get in. That's certainly helpful. But at the same time, remember how Overwatch was initially advertised, right? When it's always been advertised as a very dynamic game where you can switch and you can have all these different team compositions, and it's very creative in how you can do things. I think that switching to 2-2-2 is sort of admitting defeat instead of coming out victorious, if you know what I mean. It's saying like, oh, we just can't figure out how to balance the concept of having all these different compositions that people can play or whatever. So we're just gonna make it 2-2-2. You have no choice, and that's how it is. I have a very difficult time seeing a world where it doesn't become very boring very fast. Like, I could see maybe for the first few days, you're like, oh, this is cool. I'm getting all these like quote unquote high quality games where everyone's just playing the same thing and it's fine. And then you realize a week later, oh, okay, everyone's playing the same thing. And then players will just quietly move on to different games. I think that might be what happens. I'm very scared. I hope that doesn't happen, but I'm very scared of any sort of role lock or any sort of harsh, like, yeah, this is the mandated meta that is going to be how it is. I feel like I said, that's just sort of taking a game and saying, well, instead of fixing the issues in an interesting way, we'll just say, yeah, play our way or you don't play at all. Sorry.
Nice. And finally, where can people see more of you talking about not only the state of Overwatch and how to improve on it and stuff, but the state of lots of different games as well, and no doubt more ones added into the future?
Yeah, so I am Skyline OW on YouTube. People ask me if I'm going to take my OW out now that I'm not an exclusively Overwatch content creator, and that's a silly question. Obviously, I'm not going to take that out because that's my homage to the original, right? But Skyline OW on YouTube, the best platform on the internet. And that's pretty much where you can find me. I do Twitch as well, which is also Skyline OW, and on Twitter at Skyline_OW.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, you can check out all of Skyline's details in the description. Let me know what you thought of this video, whether you agree or disagree in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to check the playlist full of all of our interviews. Take care. We'll see you next time.